Welcome to another episode of A World in Tension. I know I always say I'm excited, so I'm sorry for repeating that, but I am excited. We have Drew White on tonight. Drew White is a local friend I've known for a while. We've been going to the same church, and we are going to go after the fear of man versus the fear of God. And I want to say something because as we've been talking about this, I think the common tendency is that I think people are familiar with this one. It's like being familiar with Christmas. And the reality is, I even said when we were off air, this fear of man stuff, I don't struggle with that as badly as other things. And then the more we talked, I'm like, oh my gosh, I struggle with this a ton. And so I encourage you, listener, as we get in here, there's something here for you. And in fact, the more I hear Drew talk, I think about how important it is for people to hear this. So Drew, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and why you want to talk about this topic today.
Well, thanks for having me, Neil and Rob. This podcast has meant so much to me personally. So to be here with you guys tonight really means a lot. I'm thankful for both of you and your friendship. So just the opportunity to be here is a blessing. And I'm here because I'm king struggler. This is not something that I've figured out. I really have seen how, this topic of the fear of man has impacted my life in dramatic ways, how the Lord has used it to show me more of himself. But ultimately, I think it's a common, like you said, it's a common shared experience that everybody on some level faces. And in my position, I'm a PE teacher, I'm a coach, so I'm in a position of leadership, and that's a constant. I think God has a sense of humor to make me a coach because no matter what you do, you're going to disappoint somebody. Somebody's gonna have criticism for what you do. But again, that's an opportunity that the Lord has brought about. And then just throughout life, I've seen just examples of how this has shown up. And so I think it's going to be really exciting for us to dive into. Hopefully it will help people.
What do you think we're going to be, and I'm opening this to Rob too, like what do you think the listeners going to be most shocked about on this? Like mind blown, open their eyes to on this topic?
Well, I think it's going to be just exactly how you processed it and spoke about it already. You said, hey, I don't think I deal with this as much as another tension. And I think something that one of us says is going to spark a memory of a very profound time in which you let the fear of man dictate something that really God should have dictated. I think this is going to be a rich episode, and I think it's going to help all of us better process how surrender is important.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Rob. So you guys ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Welcome to A World in Tension podcast, a place where we examine the opposing pulls and struggles of life to uncover clarity, purpose, and practical solutions. Come join us as we seek to get comfortable facing the uncomfortable. This is A World in Tension.
Drew, it is really good to be here with you tonight. And as you were talking in the intro, I really identified with what you were saying about fear of man. And I'm a people pleaser, and so that really resonates with me. One of the key things that we talk about on this podcast is these external tensions are often markers for deeper tensions where we can use those markers to kind of investigate areas where we're not surrendering. And I was thinking about, the COVID virus, this molecule with all these, markers and little fingers sticking out. And I can identify so many areas where the fear of man has really been an impediment to me doing, hard things, I think, for the Lord. And so, I would kind of start the conversation by asking you, what are some of those markers that really resonate with you? I think we could probably come up with a lot, but what are some that you want to address on air?
Sure. I definitely resonate with people pleasing.
Right.
Because for so many years, that's, I think that really kind of defined me. And I had an idea that to be a people pleaser was to be a good thing. It was to be a good Christian. I'm a people pleaser. But I didn't realize what all was involved in that. As I kind of look back at my life, even back to childhood, going all the way back, I see where this idea that the fear of man started to take root. I was easily embarrassed. I didn't want to stand out. I even cared about fashion, which, if you know me now, is hilarious because, but when I went to
Rob's
school,
trying not to laugh right now.
right? I'm a PE teacher, so today I wear, I have 2 pair of sweatpants that I alternate, and
Do you have tube socks with little colors on
Absolutely.
them? Okay, all right.
Did you ever own a pair of bike shorts?
I don't go that far back, but not far from that. I did have a members only jacket, so I was in that club. But no, but what I really saw more than anything is that my self-esteem was tied to the words of others. I took criticism extremely hard, and I was very tied to the praise of others. And so that really, it actually, as an athlete, it drove me. I wanted to please my coaches. But then looking forward, it kind of, I see ways that this topic of fear of man kind of morphed itself. And so somewhere along the line, I got just that I'm a people pleaser, that I'm just a nice guy. And that was kind of an image that stayed with me. And what that led to was really a struggle to set boundaries, a struggle to say no. I look back at, my 20s and I see just a person who was completely exhausted and just constantly running in different areas because I was trying to be a dad and I was trying to be a coach and I was trying to be a teacher and I was trying to be a deacon. And I was trying to do all those things because I felt like that's what everybody thought I should be doing. And so, and it really led to, a difficult point of life where I just kind of crashed. But I didn't want anybody to see that,
I think a lot of Christians, people coming to church, struggle with this whole good guy. Actually, Rob, you and I were talking about maybe doing a podcast on this one day about remember being the nice guy doormat versus what's a real man. And I think that there's such a, I think that's why there's such a visceral thing for what is a man and fighting for that in church sometimes. Whereas a lot of times it's well, just be the nice guy. So how did you, looking back on that, what? Because I think a lot of people are coming through the doors and doing it. I'd say even a majority of people come through the church doors. So what was the lie that you bought into on that? And what kind of opened your eyes that maybe this isn't the right path?
I think it was the lie of avoiding conflict and avoiding tension, meant that I was doing the right thing. Meant that I was being a spiritual person, and I really believe that's where the lie was, that I had to maintain this image, and I had to maintain this person who can't say no, who had to appear that I had it all together, and it led to a lot of overextension and not really being able to, as you said, just be a godly man who was going to stand for Christ more than, what I would appear to other people.
So, like, when did it start to break down, though? Like, as Rob was saying, like the markers, like when, because I think you just kind of do that, right? You think, and you're young, you're saying you're like, I got it. You overcommit yourself, and you're like, maybe I overcommitted, but I still got it. So, like, what started to actually like blow up, or like, and I don't think we necessarily life has to blow up, but usually seems to be what happened. So, what were those things that were starting to get your attention?
So I could see the breakdown started to happen at home, where I was not able to spend time with my kids, so I felt like a failure as a father. And then I had very young kids at the time. And then it just kind of led to not really doing anything well. And actually getting some rebukes like, hey, you're not as involved in this as you should be, or I didn't see you at this event, or whatever it might be. And so I just felt like I was constantly chasing this approval, this, validation, or I don't even know exactly what to call it, but it was almost like chasing a vapor. And ultimately what was missing was I didn't ask God, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
Like, where should I sit down and honor what would really honor you? Instead, I was thinking, what would honor this part? What would honor this person? What would make them happy?
Well, and that wasn't your intention, right? I mean, you wouldn't say as like a follower of Christ that that's what you were trying to go after, but so you kind of just got seduced or sucked into that world, right? I mean, like, so did you feel like you actually kind of woke up at one point and you're like, I can't do this anymore?
Oh, 100%. And it actually was from a rebuke of a brother and a book that really identified what was going on in my heart. And that was Drew Scott. He came to me and said, hey, brother, I'm noticing this in you, that I see you exhausted. I see you running around trying to keep everybody happy. And so he introduced the book by Ed Welch. It's called When People Are Big and When God is Small. And that was a game changer. That was a complete, one of those moments in life where you get down, why am I running around and not ever really feeling like I'm doing anything well, or like I'm really settled, or I would even go so far as to say happy. And so that book was a game changer for me.
Yeah, I mean, I was really actually interested in probing down that happiness trail in a sense. At one point when we were talking before the show, you mentioned that in a sense this fear of man or this struggle was robbing you of joy. And I think we've all been there where we feel like we're going through the motions and we don't experience true joy in the things that we're doing that would be considered good or service related. We're serving our family, we're serving our church, we're doing our profession well, and yet it's absent of joy. I think that's a sign that something's off. And it sounds like you were, kind of getting to that place.
Absolutely. I would say that there was very little joy through those years because I was chasing that, ultimate approval from man. And I really see that today as well. I'm a coach, and I always say God's got a sense of humor to make a people pleaser a high school coach, because we all know, there's 10 dads that can coach it a lot better than you can. They all know, they're all right, So
they're at every game.
Right, they're at every game. They don't miss a practice either. No, but so. As a coach, as a person of leadership, I have an opportunity for ministry. And the joy in working with the guys in baseball and the joy of seeing them grow and mature as men, a lot of times was taken away because I was agonizing over, if I make this decision, what is this dad going to think? Or what if I make the wrong decision, what's going to happen? What are they going to think of me as a coach? Will they still think I'm a good coach? And so, again, it goes back to the heart of, am I really doing what I'm doing to honor the Lord? Or am I doing it to try to impress other people?
I think one thing that's really interesting about this tension to me is that, like Rob was saying, it kind of lives on the external layer. And the whole concept in the show is like you got to probe down into the external and then into your internal faculties with your heart and your mind, and then you get deep. It's like peeling off layers of the onion. So my question, or I think that it's interesting to me, is like, did this whole fear of man, which is very much an external tension, did that kind of keep you, do you think, like out on the surface more, or what? Like, how did that relate to the struggle with God? Like, do you see what I'm saying? Did it keep you like on the outer boundary of the onion, or what do you think?
Oh, 100%. Because it kept me running around thinking, well, I guess I got to do more. I guess I got to do more for people. Maybe I'm not pleasing them enough, or whatever it is. And one thing that this book really helped to identify, Rob, we talked about how people pleasing kind of look as a positive. And I guess in some regards it can be.
Yeah, people will think you're a nice guy.
Right. But what was really happening, if we dive deeper, is that I was holding people as an idol. It was idolatry in my heart. And so the goal of this book, I love, the main theme is that you need people less and love people more. That's the goal. You get to a point where I don't need the approval of others, and in that I can be free to love them, and I can be free to, as you mentioned from the outset, get outside of that box and feel the freedom of the Lord as I walk with Him. But can I read how he identifies fear of man? Because I think it's such a helpful definition. He says, fear of man, the biblical sense, includes being afraid of someone, but it extends to holding someone in awe, being controlled or mastered by people, worshiping other people, putting your trust in other people, or needing people. So I think that's where it takes all of these different forms. And so, that's where I felt I was living on the outside. I felt like I needed people in order to be able to walk the Christian walk.
We talk about control, our need for control versus surrender. And so we were talking about like, well, what you're actually letting other people control you. So how are you controlling the situation, right? And it's this weird twisted thing where you're letting people drive you, but you're doing it to like make it feel better about yourself. It's so like, talk about, and I'm not saying it's twisted like yours is more messed up. I'm saying like unpack the confusion that exists in that, because it's like, I want to feel good. No, I want to do what they want to do. Like, but how did you start to free yourself from that crazy web of back and forth?
So I think it you have to identify it first of all. So once I realized that I was actually being controlled, in a sense, not completely, but in a sense, being controlled by others and what they thought, then I could start to hit the nail on the head. And I'm going to read Paul's definition of because it's very helpful for us.
Yeah, please.
In Galatians chapter 1, verse 10, Paul says, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." So that's where it really, that verse meant so much to me, because you know, I saw people were big in my life. They were big. They were determining my actions. And so I realized that I had it backwards, that I had to start being a servant of Christ first. And in that, I would be out of this web, like, or not completely free, but I would be on the path. So I started to just simply ask the question, Lord, what do you want me to do? What areas of life, even if they may be good, do I need to start, putting to the side? And once I started to do that, and I still struggle with it, still wake up every day and struggle with it, but once I started to do that, it was amazing. I started to feel this almost weight lifted off, this freedom that started happening. And then I realized I can better serve the Lord in this, and in that I can love people more.
It kind of reminds me in a sense of how the gospel impacted me when I finally got it. And that was this. I had been taught that when I was doing the right things, that God loved me. God was proud of me. God was looking down and, go Rob. And when I wasn't doing the right things, God was upset. And, oh, Rob, you're not doing it right. And then I realized that God loved me despite of me, that it had nothing to do with me, that it had everything to do with him. And all of a sudden, the things that constantly brought me to the bottom of that roller coaster ride, the things where I wasn't doing right, that were so hard to combat, became less hard to combat because it was the love of God and the focus on him that made me actually want to serve him. And so that's where the joy came into my salvation at that point, was when I got the gospel. And so, when you're talking like that, it really reminds me of that very truth, because it kind of flips the script in a way. I mean, what you're saying is, in a sense, love the Lord your God, see him for what he is and what he's done for you, and then do what comes natural.
Right.
And I could see that as being something that would feel like a weight lifted. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting in this whole topic is like fear of God, right? Like, what does that actually mean? Because what some people may think, oh, I have to do the right things, otherwise God is going to be mad at me, so I need to be fearful. And that's not what that actually makes you more of a people pleaser, because if you can please his people, then you'll please him too, right? So talk a little bit about how the truth of God and the love of God made you understand. Like Proverbs says, the fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom. Mm-hmm. So you're starting to get smart, but like, what does that mean really? Because it's different than the fear. The fear of man is really a fear that's unhealthy, but the fear of God is a very healthy thing. Like, what's your impression on that?
Oh, that's it right there. I think when we talk about the fear of God, we're talking about faith. We're talking about, I love how David King describes it as a trembling trust. So we're in awe of him, but we're not afraid of him to the point where I cannot come to him. And that's because of what Christ has done on our behalf. So, but it's holding him in awe. We see the awesomeness of God. We see him as creator and sovereign ruler over all things, as the one in control. When we see how big he is, when we see how great he is, and what can man do to me? It kind of releases the power of man on your life, and all of a sudden you realize that's where I need to be. I need to walk in faith and honor him.
So one of the things we talk about, because we want to get, this, to me, this show is kind of like about two parts: the need to reflect in, because people don't do that enough. They really stay on the surface. But then secondly, what does that reflection teach you, and how do you go out into the world? And we say to be agents of redemption, right? So like, there's people listening, they may be in codependent relationships. They may be that total people pleaser at church, just to whatever, or at work to rise up the levels, or just to, I don't know. There's tons of ways you can do this, but like, how do you think all this reflection and you read some of scripture, and there's actually even more you were talking about. How has that changed your perspective to now want to go back out from the inside out to dealing with people? Like what are you working on now, and to change and be sort of that changed person?
Well, to talk about that, I think I need to touch on about 5 years ago. We had a very difficult event that happened in life, a very public event that really led to kind of the falling out, a breakdown of my marriage, and that was really hard for me, because I kind of prided my life and having a good marriage and a family and having it together and being this godly spiritual guy, and then all of a sudden I realized I had to come to church very vulnerable, very obvious that I didn't have it all together, that life had crumbled, and I had hit the bottom. And there were very, very dark days, and there still are. When I come to church on Sunday mornings, it's still one of the hardest things for me to do is to get out of the car and to walk in, because not because of how people have been. The church has been fantastic, so supportive, but it's how I perceive what might others be thinking, about me or about my situation, or and that can be very paralyzing. And so I had to get to a place, and the Lord really kind of cut through, and this is where the value and tension comes in, because God used that tension in my life to bring me to really a rock bottom place where all I had was Him, where my idols had been slashed, the idols of my, this happy life and home life and all of this had kind of come crashing down, and all I had was Christ. And what I found was He is enough, that He is enough. And so as God ministered to me, as He used that trial and is still doing today, I realized that I don't have to fear what others will think about me, because I have love and acceptance in the gospel. I have the full assurance that Christ has died for me, that He's given his life for me, that He's been resurrected, that if I'm in union with Him, if I'm joined with Him, that I have everything that I need. I have full acceptance. I have love that will never leave me and never forsake me. So why do I have to go out and put on this image and try to say I have it all figured out? Right? Why do we do that in the church? We don't have to. We can live real lives before each other. We can say, I'm here because I'm broken. I'm here because I need Jesus. I'm here because I'm struggling. And so I still struggle with it every day. I still struggle with, what will people think when they look at in my life, if it, in a broken marriage. But I can say, you know what? I have Christ. I have His fulfillment. I have His acceptance. And, man, if we could get that, because what the fear of man does is it really, it shortchanges the gospel. It says we don't really believe the gospel.
It's really awesome to hear you talk about this because, I mean, there's two things that come to my mind. Number one, if you don't believe in Christ, this is why it's so much more than a religion. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not, there's actually something that's powerful. And that's just so encouraging to hear. But then secondly, if you are a believer, like, God's going to work on you, and he works on us in different ways to just strip stuff back. And he does it in different ways, some more severe than others. But it's all about the same, about what you said, that you're all I need. And you realizing, I know some days you wake up and you're like, I need way more than that. Right. But in reality, there's a depth, there's a foundation that doesn't shift, that says, no, this is really all I need. And that's just, I mean, just listening to you talk about it, it's like, it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I praise God for that. And I've realized the ebb and the pulls of the tension that, and ultimately you can be thankful for it, because what it does is it if you the basis of your podcast, if you accept it, and if you can learn to thank God for it, because what it does, it drives you to submitting to Christ. And that's where real joy is found.
He is sovereign, and he is going to strip us of those things that we have made idols.
Right.
And some of those idols can be surprising. It can be your happy family, or your wonderful church, or your amazing job. It can be things that you think are amazing or good,
right,
or are supposed to be good. But if it's clouding our view of him, then he's gonna come after it.
Right.
So
it's like both terrifying, which is kind of like that fear element, but it's also, what's awesome about God is he never does it, even though your life probably felt stripped away and there were moments that you said were dark. In the end, though, I think if you really hold on to Christ, you felt the love, right? You felt this is not being done just to punish me, or it's
right,
not about punishment.
Right.
Well, so as we wrap up here, what encouragement would you guys want to give to the listener who's maybe starting to go, you know what, I need to do this, whatever it is related to this topic? What's the last thing you'd want to tell them?
Well, Proverbs 29:25, the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. So I would say the end of Ecclesiastes, says, let me look it up. I was about. Rob, do you have any thoughts as I'm turning here?
Well, yeah, no, I will.
I was about to really.
Here, you look it up, and I'll say this. Neil. This gets to the heart of the second layer of the onion and the third layer of the onion. These things are markers, and we need to go deep. We need to look at the areas internally where we are not surrendering, because surrender to God is peaceful. It's a peaceful surrender. And I could get it. I mean, I could almost feel it, as Drew was talking, how beautiful and restful it is to just finally fall into his arms and let him hold you, and then be able to do his work. There's nothing more peaceful than that.
I felt the power in that when you were talking about that.
I really did.
There was like something shifted in all of us, because it's the power of God's truth, the deepness, the richness of it resonating in all of our hearts as believers. Like you could feel it.
Yeah, the power of surrender to God.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hit us up with Ecclesiastes now that you have the reference.
We love Ecclesiastes here.
Yeah. So I thought I had it. It was just
It went away.
God doesn't want you to be too reliant on.
That's right.
You got it all locked down, Drew.
Ecclesiastes 12:13. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. So I think the thing that I would want to add to that is trust God's promises more than than what we perceive will be people's actions. So keep yourselves in the love of God. Cling to his promises, because it's there that you find joy, not in what validation you can get from others.
Yeah, I think that's a good word. Well, Drew, it's been a real pleasure having you on, and I appreciate your authenticity and courage to share. So thanks, brother, for coming on and sharing with us.
Man, thank you guys for having me. So much fun.
Yeah, this has been a blast.
All right. Thank you for joining us for another episode of A World in Tension.